Okay, might rain on me while I'm going for this walk. I knew that one of the stories I'm going to need to talk about is one that I've had a big impact on my life. And the story is, as I was talking to my friend Dan Thurman the other day, I mentioned my stories will revolve around friends, around family. They come out of things that happened with my work, with my job as a performer. But also, they also kind of are like serendipitous, they're kind of things that were from an adventure or from me just on a whim doing something. And that's very true. This one's going to be the first of my videos that I will make around a friendship. I had gone to Boston. Again, this was a little bit of a whim that I had a round trip ticket from Idaho to Montreal and back with my friend Brian Bailey. And that was a wonderful trip. This is not about Brian, but I'll mention about that. He's actually going to come out and see me here in Japan for several weeks next year. And we had taken this trip to Montreal to go to an IJA convention. It's an International Jugglers Association. And I had traveled always by myself before, but this time I was traveling with him. He always said this was like one of the best experiences in his life, was going on this trip. We had a great time. We spent time in Montreal. We went up to Quebec City, and yeah, it was a wonderful time. And I bought a tall unicycle at the convention and sold my small unicycle. And was doing shows up there in Quebec City. And then I had already made up the decision in my mind that I'd been wanting to go to Boston ever since I met the New England, New Vaudeville people that had come to Hawaii several years before. And so I told my friend, Brian, that I would be not returning to Idaho, that we had a layover in Boston, and that kind of layover was actually changing planes, staying there in that airport for a couple hours, and we hung out for a while. And I did not get back on the plane. I had gotten in contact with one of the guys I had met back there in Hawaii who lived in Boston. His name was Alex Feldman. His name still is Alex Feldman. Anyway, very great performer. People know him as Alexander the Jester. And he was going to let me stay for a few days at his house. So I called and I got the directions from him how to get to Harvard Square where he lived. And I remember coming out of the subway into Harvard Square in the middle of summer and thinking, I should have been here when I was 18 years old. But at that point, it was 1992 and I was 31. People always thought I was younger. People have always thought I was younger. So I think the performers I met during that time probably pretty much thought I was their age, in their mid-20s. But this was coming off of the winter in San Francisco, where I had done my boot camp days, and now I was much better. I had the tall unicycle, I had a straitjacket, and my fiddle, and some juggling clubs. And I had worked a little bit on getting out of a straitjacket on my small unicycle. Had no idea how to do that on the tall unicycle. And I hadn't really thought about doing the straitjacket on the tall unicycle as a finale yet. My finale I was doing in Quebec City was playing my fiddle. Years later, I would get back into doing the fiddle finale, which pretty much I'm known for. But at that time, I had my props. I went into one of those nights. I went down to, it was like, I think maybe one of the last nights I was supposed to be staying with Alex. I think I had like 3 days. He told me that he said he had an open policy for any performer at that point that they could stay for 3 days and be his house guest. So I was running out of time. What would I do? And I had been doing shows, and I didn't realize yet that there was a curfew, that you couldn't go past a certain time. And it was past that time. The other performers weren't there, and it was a weekday. And this guy, he's legendary as a juggler. Now, his name is Peter McLaughlin. Now, Peter had just come out of a movie, came out, saw me there. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. We're seeing each other for the first time. And he sees my props, and he asks if I do a straitjacket on a tall unicycle. And I said, well, actually, I do it on a smaller unicycle, but I just got the tall unicycle, and I'm not sure how I would even get on it in a straitjacket. And he told me, oh, you do it this way. And so I go ahead and try it. We go ahead and try it, and I get up. I got a little small audience, and I did it for my first time. It's very scary because my unicycle skills were basically of not idling in one place yet. I had to ride around, so that made it a little scarier. And I went ahead and did it. I didn't realize that he was so happy that I had done it, because it would piss off this one performer that that was known as the Boston's most hated man. That's what he liked to pride himself on. His name was Cyrus. And Cyrus really hated me when he found out, that I was in town and I'm doing the straitjacket on a tall unicycle. And I was still working out my show, and I would get better very quickly. As to what should I end with, I wanted to do both these things, but the fiddle on top of a tall unicycle, straitjacket on a tall unicycle, you got to pick one. And I learned very quickly that I made more money doing the straitjacket on a tall unicycle than I did fiddle on a tall unicycle, so that's what I stuck with. And that Cyrus hated, because that was what he did. And he was kind of older than the rest of us. He was probably around 40 or early 40s at that point. So he hated me. He really hated me. Peter, on the other hand, and said, "Hey, I got a bed on the back porch of, the apartment that I'm in, like on the third floor or something like that. And you're welcome to stay there." So I was like, "Wow, this is great." So I had a place for the rest of the summer. I was making money, doing well, and doing my shows. Now, that same summer that I came to Boston, another person would be coming to Boston. That would be a real important part of my life. His name was Igor Fokin. Igor is from Russia. He is from St. Petersburg, Russia. And this is 1992. This is pretty close to, Perestroika. All the time that, now people from Russia were able to travel. Well, 1992, he was with it's going to start raining on me. Let's see. I'm going to head back for a bridge where I could take some shelter. But yeah, it's pouring. It's going to start pouring on me. So anyway, it's Igor saying hi. Okay, so a little cue. Igor's not with us anymore. So Igor had come with a theater group performing. Oh gosh, what was the name of that play? It's a very famous Russian play. The three. God, I'll remember it later. Anyway, he was an actor, but he was also a puppeteer. And he came and he saw Harvard Square that same time that I did. I wouldn't see him again till the next summer. He had gone back and he wanted to come back to Harvard Square with his puppets. So he did. Alexander the Jester, and I were in Harvard Square hanging out because I would hang out all day holding my spot, so I would hold my rotation and to be able to perform in the pitch. I was working there in Faneuil Hall in Boston, but you could only do 3 performers on the pitch. If you showed up late, you didn't get the pitch, you didn't get in the rotation. So I would always show up early, and I would stay there all day long waiting for the evening for my chance to do a show. And Alex wasn't performing, but he came down to the square because he lived there. And he and I were sitting on the wall when Igor set up to do his very first show. And he set up in front of a store. It was called, what was the name of the store? I forget. It was right behind the pitch where we did our show. It would not be where Igor ended up being famously, where he would always do his show. Anyhow, he did his show and had Russian music with Russian words in it. It didn't really matter because it was really intriguing watching his puppets. His puppets were different than how I'd seen marionette puppets done before. His puppets, instead of just kind of walked around, they scurried. They were almost like watching cartoons coming to life, the way they moved. Had a lot of character to them. He had built them. And he had quite an art background and theater background. So anyway, we watched his show. He didn't say anything to be able to pass the hat afterwards, so he didn't really make anything. But we watched his very first show. We suggested to him that he figure out a way to ask people for money towards the end of his show so people know to give money. Igor never did, right to the end. He never did it. He never asked for money. He just kept doing what he did. And I was leaving at the end of that summer. I was moving to Atlanta, of all things, I wanted to go to the Center for Puppetry Arts in Atlanta, Georgia, and study puppetry. Because years before I was even a full-time street performer, I had been in puppetry with Shirley Musgrove in Sun Valley, Idaho. And I had done a children's pilot for a children's television show, all with puppetry, called Cosmic Plane. And that was still kind of my goal, was to make this thing work, my project. And going to study puppetry was key on my mind. And this is only a very short time after Jim Henson died, which had been one of my dreams, is to someday meet Jim Henson and work with Jim Henson, but that would not happen. So anyway, I'm going to Atlanta, and we just met Igor. And he gave me a card. He had a card made up with his phone number on it. And I left. And even though Igor's English was just a little bit of English that he knew, he and I started trying to talk on the phone. And I was telling him what I was doing and what I was learning in puppetry, and I wanted him to come to Atlanta and see the Center for Puppetry Arts. And he had told me he felt bad that his wife and son were still in Russia, and he was doing well, but they didn't have much to eat. And he told me stories of they'd go and wait all day in line for food, and by the time they get to the end, where they only find out there's no food left. And he wanted them to come. And come the next summer, when I returned to Boston to street perform, he was so happy. His wife had come out, and she was there with their son. And his son, Zhenya, was not his blood son. Later I'd find out that he had an older son that was in Russia. Many people never knew that he had didn't know that he had a son until I told them after he had already passed away. But anyway, he's there. And, we're still keeping our friendship, going. When I was not in Boston, we would still talk on the phone. And he was doing better and better and had a good spot that people would come and watch his show. People would bring their friends and to watch the show over and over again. I mean, it was just one of those things that started becoming famous. And especially with the people in the Russian community in Boston, they would come and see his shows. I came back the next year, and he had a baby girl. And he was so proud. And he was also proud that she was born in America. That was, very interesting thing for him. America was a lot of firsts for him. He was doing really good. I'd see him, and he gained a little weight, and I'd say Igor, you gained weight. And go, America's very good to me. He was doing great, and he would always tell me over and over again, in Russia, I was nobody, but here I'm somebody. I'm doing great here. Well, the following summer was going to be the Olympics, and in Atlanta. And I had been trying to get Igor to come. I've been trying to work on all kinds of things to be able to see if I can get Igor to come down and work, and make money, and have it all, work out for him. And so I found this festival right down near downtown. It was going to be at the same time of the Olympics, and lots of performers, and it was very organized. It was a very organized event, and it was going to be great. Okay, so I got Igor in on this, and he came down. He drove down and he stayed at my place with my girlfriend Holly, and we had a great time together. We were there before that event, and we go, we get our passes, we do all the things that we need to do for this festival. The night before the festival, we had gone and everything, and then something incredible happened. Terrible was like the night before the event, all of a sudden the guy who had organized this big event, all the sponsoring and everything like that, had taken all the money and disappeared. The event wasn't happening. And we went down on the day that it was supposed to be there, the event, and there's no event, and we were trying to figure out what's going on. There's no event. This guy, has disappeared. Trying to call this woman that was the woman that was under him, and she is still around, but she's overwhelmed with everybody calling her. And at the point where I figured out, okay, we got to do something else. I'm at my desk, and the bed that Igor was staying in was right next to mine, my desk, and Igor is very worried, and he's just lying on his back going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, right? And I'm on the phone trying to find work for us, something to do in the Olympics. Finally, I had to turn to Igor. Igor, would you be quiet? I can't talk to people. And he starts laughing. And I managed to find us a place. It wasn't very good. And the first couple of days, it was just like, oh my gosh, there's not much going on here. It's not a very good gig. Igor starts walking around when that's not, when the break time. And he finds a place that's right next to Centennial Park. And that's where we want to be, but everything was blocked off. We don't have permission. We can't go to Centennial Park. But this is right there next to Centennial Park. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. And it's real street performing. I'm doing shows, he's doing shows. They're all, they're not mixed together. It's my street show, the tall unicycle, his show. And yeah, we're doing well. And then we take a break one day. And there was a little Russian food place, and we're having pierogies. We're just kind of killing some time. And this explosion goes off. It's rocketing through the buildings. We hear it like, oh, wow, what's this? And then shortly after, really quick, we start hearing sirens and things are going nuts. And people are screaming and yelling, and I say to Igor, I go like, I don't know what happened. Maybe some fireworks that were supposed to go off all went off at one time. I don't know. This doesn't sound good. We should try to get back to my house while we can, because the subways are going to be just, packed. So we get back to my place. We turn on the news and we find out, there's this terrorist bomb that had gone off right next to where we had been performing. And I'm going, oh my God, we're watching this. And he's going, oh God, can I call Russia? I need to tell my mother I'm okay. And I'm going like, I can't afford for you to call Russia. Now I would think very differently about that. But back then, I hadn't lived in another country, and the idea of calling Russia was crazy to me. Of course, now it's very different, and we can talk for free to people around the world. But that was 1996, and I'm like, oh, you have to get a calling card or something. He calls his wife, who's in Boston, lets her know, we're okay. And he was really worried because all his puppets we had found a place to get things locked up. And we had just already locked our stuff up for the night when we were taking our break. So our stuff was all locked up at some place nearby where we were going to perform, where we were performing. He couldn't sleep all night. He was so worried about his puppets. Of course, that's his livelihood and everything, So as soon as it got light, he was up before me and driven down, got through police barricades to be able to get in and get to his puppets, and he was going to drive back to Boston. Yeah, he can, because everything was going to be closed. Centennial Park, everything is blocked off. We're not going to make any money. We're not going to do anything. And he heads back to Boston. But prior to going to Boston, we had many lunches, and he had a funny thing that he had said one time. He wanted to take me to St. Petersburg. He wanted to show me Russia. There's several things about that time that I would like to say. Well, one is, Igor's birthday was one day away from mine. He was a year and 1 day older than me. And he called me on my birthday, and I call him on his birthday. He called me the next day on my birthday. And he played me this song while he was staying at my house, and he translated the lyrics to me. And it was a song about that I'm in this country, and in this country, nothing looks familiar. Nothing's like Russia. The plants don't look like Russia. The buildings, nothing looks like Russia. But sometimes at night, the moon looks a little bit like Russia. And he had a tear in his eye as he was telling me this. And he also let me know that he really resented when people in America were saying that he had immigrated. He would say to me, I'm not an immigrant. I'm a guest in your country. I someday will go back to Russia, and I want you to come with me. I want to show you Russia. And I said to him, because I talk a lot. I have a lot to say. I have a lot of things that I do talk a lot. And I said, oh, Igor, I think it would be good if I go to Russia, go to a country that doesn't speak English. I won't talk as much as I do. And he looked at me and goes, oh, Doc, you'd die. So in let me keep walking here. Someone was coming up trying to talk to me, but I'm trying to make a recording. All right, he goes back to Boston, and I go and visit him in a couple days with my girlfriend. And because I don't have any work either, all my street performing work would be up in Boston at that time if the Olympics weren't on. And so the Olympics were still going on TV, and I'm driving up to Boston with my girlfriend, Holly. And I'm performing. I'm at that time I'm working for a puppet company in Atlanta, and I'm designing puppets and working on things. When Igor was there, he was giving me art classes on sculpting and all his things were sculpted out of wood, and I was making out of neoprene into molds, and I had already poured the molds and and had the neoprene out of the molds when I got to Boston and saw him. And I showed him what I made, and he looked at it and goes, "Oh, America!" You wouldn't do that in Russia. You just carve things out of wood. But it was we had this wonderful friendship. But I wanted to say, I'm skipping around here a little bit, so pardon me. When the morning was that he was leaving, I saw him at his van, and right before he was going to leave, he said, "Okay, Tuck, we have to do one more thing. This is a Russian thing. We need to go back in your house, and we're going to just sit at the table. We don't say anything. We're just going to sit and enjoy each other's company." It was wonderful. Igor was this wonderful friend. And I loved the traditions, and I loved everything about it. He was like this brother in a way. Yet we both grown up in this time where, our governments were making us think, the enemy is there. I was born in 1961. He was born in 1960. So anyway, now we're up there. And his wife was pregnant with now another baby coming. And besides the little girl that he already had, Igor had been telling me, how happy he was as a father. My girlfriend, Holly, had said one time to him, "Igor, shut up, Igor. Stop telling Tak how happy you are, because he's going to want to be a father, and I can't have kids, and he's going to leave me." He thought that was very funny. Well, it came time for me to leave. I have to go back to Boston, and I have to go back to Atlanta, because I'm doing this puppet show that's going to open, with the school year. It's going to start raining on me again. All right, so it does. I'll go over here and get underneath some trees. So I go back, and I'm working on things, and I'm busy because this puppet show. And he gives me a phone call, and he's calling me because his son was just born, and he's calling me from the hospital. And he says, "Oh, Tak, I've got a beautiful baby boy. I'm so tired, but I wanted to call and tell you." And that was it. I would never hear Igor's voice again. I'm starting to pouring down rain. I'm underneath some trees. Maybe it's good that it's pouring as I'm talking about this. About 2 weeks went by. And it was around, I think it was around the 21st. I always get confused on it. But of September. And I'm supposed to do a festival in Piedmont Park called the Arts Festival. And a Boston performer who's a magician had come the night before to stay at my house and work the festival. And this is now the morning that we're getting ready, have breakfast, go work this festival. And Igor's wife calls me and tells me, Igor died last night from a heart attack. I wanted to call you because You were his friend. He loved you. I'm in shock. I don't even know what to say. I must have said how sorry I was for him and that I was going to make some phone calls to try to help and get some help for her. I get off the phone and I turn to, his name was Peter, magician, and my girlfriend Holly. I get out the words, Igor is dead. And that's all I can say. I'm a mess. I call a friend in Boston, Jim McComb, known as performer Jim, who does the Jim show. Now he's retired and doing very well with his own farm in western Massachusetts. He's known to many people for being beekeeping, but he would become very famous within the street performing community because he ran a performers website called performers.net. Everybody knew Jim. Amazing performer. And he answers the phone and I'm crying and to say, Igor's dead. And I'm trying, and he's going like, what? And slowly he starts to get it. And he says to me, it's sinking in. It's just sinking in. He's going, oh my God, Asia, Igor's wife, they just had a baby. Wow. I can't move from this spot right now. It's just pouring rain around me. Tears from heaven. Well, I go down to the festival like I'm supposed to perform. There's no way I can. I can't do it. Peter's going to do his show and he's going to stay there. And I left the place and walked across the street to a travel agency and booked a flight right out for Boston. I wasn't able to get out that day, that first thing in the next morning. And I went. I let the festival know I could not perform. I wasn't going to be there. And I've never done that before. But, some things are more important. This was one of them. And I flew up. On the spot, Alex picked me up at the airport. I'm going to try walking back. See, I might get a little wet here. He picked me up at the airport and drove me to Harvard Square, where flowers and a memorial and a picture that I had taken of Igor doing his show was. People were putting money and there was a video stuff that all the local news were all covering it in Boston. This was huge. You wouldn't think it would be that big, but Igor was well loved. People had never heard his voice. They watched his show. He never asked for money. They put money in, and his show was all pre-recorded music. And people were reacting to the tragedy and the loss of talent, which I found myself resenting. I had lost my friend, and really all I wanted was to get to where The family was. And Alex drove me to their house. Interesting thing was that no one had ever been to Igor's house. I'd helped him move into this new house while I was there just a few weeks before. One of the performers that, we all good friends with, had actually lived right across the street from Igor's old apartment, and he never known that. And people knew in the performing circle, they knew Igor from that place. But, we had lived together for weeks. I've been talking on the phone for years. We had spent time together. I went with his family to Walden Pond, and we spent time. We knew each other. We're really good friends. And when I was there finally with the family, and after Alex left, everything was kind of okay, normal for us. And meanwhile, while I'm spending time with the family, Jim had been organizing with the other performers to put on a benefit. They've been working with the city. The news was interested. It was a big story, So his funeral was going to be the next weekend. It's starting to rain on me again. I thought I could get out into the rain. Oh man, can't. Okay, gotta get back under this. Picked a bad day to do this. I'm just soaking wet. All right, get under a tree. All right. So, damn, I can't get. I wonder if I can make it to the bridge again. Let's see. Maybe I can make it to the bridge. Here, I'll get under some shelter. There's a place over here, a parking garage. All right. Get all this drama going on in the rain and the weather while I'm telling this dramatic story. So the funeral was going to be on the Saturday. And Saturday night, they would do this benefit in Brattle Square, it's a part of Harvard Square. They got the street blocked off. We would do this benefit in the middle of the street. And here we go. I'm under shelter now. So, well, the funeral, the fellow performers, they were all really, touched by this whole thing. Maybe the first person that's really their friend and one of their own that had died. But I'm sitting with the family, and as it comes time for the family to go up to the open coffin, they're bending down and they're kissing him goodbye. The last one of the family goes over and does it, and I know it's up to me. I gotta go kiss my friend goodbye. I've never even seen a dead person in an open coffin before. I go over and I'm at the coffin and I put my hand on his chest and I could feel like, it's just like meat, I bend down and I kiss him. I don't know, I couldn't see from everything else, that you're supposed to be kissing on the forehead. I had no. I bent down and I kissed him right on the lips. My dead friend. Found out later, oh yeah. No, you're not supposed to do that. I don't know. Russian traditions, I don't know. So anyway, comes the evening, and after this emotional day, saying goodbye to my friend and a week of being in town, we do this benefit in the street. It was estimated 3,000 people showed up. It was crazy. The first 10 rows of people were all just sitting on the ground on the street, and rows going back up the street. There's a movie, you can watch it on YouTube. It's called The Puppeteer, or you can just look up Igor Fokin. Igor and then Fokin, Igor Fokin. There's a few movies made on him. There was actually a book too. Anyway, at the end of our show, our benefit show, a big group show, the crowd is giving money to us, and we all did independent shows leading up to the big show too. Pasim's folk club in Harvard Square had set up to be able to handle all the money. It was estimated, it was a lot of money. Thousands. It was a lot of money. I'd like to say how much it was, but I think for privacy issues, I should probably not say, but it was a lot. And a trust fund had been set up, and a year later, like 3 times that much. It was enough that his wife was able to go back to Russia and buy a house and cover all the medical issues that they would have with their daughter. It was a great thing that Jim hadn't done. But when it came time, as the days were growing closer, Jim had realized that he had set up the event for a day that he had a gig that day. And he said he didn't know what he could do. He asked to go to this gig. Alex, too, had a gig. Wasn't able to do it. And I said, well, you can cancel. And they said, you can't just not go to a gig. And I said, why not? I did. I had a gig. I left, So anyway, that was me. And a choice I'll forever be glad that I, didn't do it. I'm probably never going to work that festival again, but, hey, didn't matter to me. And I mean, that was it. And it came down to it, this event that Jim was putting together and Alex too. They would try to make something later on at Christmas time. But I mean, you can never recreate a miracle. What happened that one night, the people that were there, in the audience, in the show, in the video that was made, and it was magic. And I can't say that the same thing would happen for Igor in another city or another time or anything. It was the perfect storm. It's just a couple of years before 9/11 would change everything too. People would change. Harvard Square, that Harvard community, everything that existed at that time in the fall of 1996 in that special place with those people would never happen again. And it was kind of the end of an era. It kind of marked that, because Harvard Square would never really be what it used to be. Things would change after that. I tried to do it the next year, and I was like, tried to perform there, and it was very different. And one of the things that had happened that September, when I last talked to Igor, was that I got a job offer to go that fall to Japan to work at Holland Village in Nagasaki. And at the last moment, they decided to go with another performer, but they said they would hire me soon. And Igor had told me he'd always wished that he could go to Japan and see how Japanese would react to his puppets. Well, so I had been holding Igor's baby at their house, and I had basically, I think I've been afraid to even consider being a father. I didn't have a very good relationship with my own father. My childhood with my father was not good, and I was afraid I might not be a good father. And perhaps that's why I was with Holly. Her son was already grown. He was 20 years old. And she couldn't have any more children. She was a little older than me. Maybe. But I called her up from Boston, and I told her what was happening. And I said, something's changing in me. I'm getting the feeling that if I went through this life not experiencing fatherhood, I'd be missing something very important. The last time I'd ever heard Igor's voice, there was something in his voice that was different. This happiness mixed with tired, something that it just was hard to describe. But I could hear it in his voice, and it was the last time I would ever hear his voice. So I was thinking and holding his son and thinking, there's something wrong if I don't, I'll be missing something really important in my life. And I told her this, and she said, well, you know, I can't have children. And I said, well, we could adopt. And she agreed, and we were talking more about it. I got ready. I have to fly back home. But I told Igor's widow, his wife, that I'd be back at Christmas to help make Christmas better for their family. I promised I would be back by then. And during that time, before I left, Jim had taken Asia, his wife, down to Harvard Square after the day after the big show. And now there wasn't any memorial anymore. There was nothing there. There was no flowers like there had been. And it was a bit much for Jim. He didn't know how to handle it. She's just crying. There was nothing there. So before I left, I didn't know if she would be down there again. I went across the street to the Harvard Square florists. I paid it all in advance, and I said, I want you to put a dozen roses on Igor's spot every Friday night until Christmas. So I paid for that. And I went home. But I'm also concerned. I'm supposed to be doing all these puppet shows for Halloween, for Christmas, through the company that I'm working with. And, this show that I have been putting together, that I wrote and I was building and all this stuff for the schools for this company, that I have to talk to my boss. And I fly into Atlanta. I go and I sit down on MARTA, which is the public transportation. It's a subway. And it's at the end of the line because it's the airport. It's just waiting to go. And I'm sitting there thinking about, I got to talk to my boss. All of a sudden, she walks in that car and sits down next to me without even recognizing or realizing that she just sat down next to me. And I think in my head, because of just everything that's happened, is I can expect anything to happen. Everything that just happened was just a miracle. with the show and the giving of the people, and in such tragedy, there was so much else that was happening. And so I turned to her and I said, Carol, we need to talk. And she's shocked. Oh my God, tack, what? And she, for years, up until her death, she would always bring up how I didn't even think it was strange that she had just happened to sit down next to me. I told her, I have to go. I have to go back to Boston and Christmas. Well, I get home and my girlfriend is leaving me, and she's crying, and she's telling me that once she realized the only reason she was willing to be a mother again was out of fear of losing me, and that she couldn't do that, and that she realized we were on very different paths, that I was going to be a father and we weren't going to be together. We were actually engaged. We were going to get married. She'd moved out by the end of the week. And, I got another apartment because I'm on my own, couldn't afford the rent for just one person in a two-person place. My last load to my new place, it was raining, and I stopped behind a car at night, heading on one of the main streets in Atlanta, and all of a sudden I hear these screeching brakes, and I look in my rearview mirror, and the lights are just flying into me. The next sound was just broken glass, and I'm sandwiched, and it's an accordion thing. I'm smashed the back of my car. It smashed the front of my car with the car before it. It was my last load. I'd taken my stilts and I put them. There wasn't enough room in my little small Honda, Civic thing that I had, and so I put the stilts like right behind my head. I'm like, well, this will be fine unless I'm rear-ended. Ha ha ha. Yeah. I didn't move until they had opened the car door and ambulance was there. And I felt like I was okay, just pretty shooken up, and the car is totaled, of course. And so that happened, and I start thinking about what I'm doing in Atlanta. I should be in Boston. And so I didn't know why I was in Atlanta anymore. And I start making my plans. My friend Dan Thurman was very supportive, knowing what I'd gone through and everything that was up there for me. So I make my arrangements. I tell my boss, when I'm going up to, I'm going to Boston, and I'm under contract. And she goes, yeah, I know, I've already okayed that. And I go like, no, you don't understand. I'm not coming back. And we were practicing a show night before Christmas. I'm learning to do this one-person hand puppet show that I got to do through Christmas time up until I leave. And she says, if you do this thing, and this is not a threat, if you do this thing, I will tell everybody what you've done, and you will never work in this town again. And in my head, I kind of thought it was very cliche-ish. You'll never work in this town. You'll never work in this city again. That's true. No, I never did puppetry in Atlanta again. I briefly have done some other work there, but I did move back, And one of the performers, one of the jugglers, he came and picked me up at the airport. And it was kind of strange. He took me up to the parking garage, and he's motioning out to over the city, and he goes, "This is my town," right? And he drives me over to Alex's house. I just want to go see the family. That's what I'm going up there. I'm going to just try to help as I can. And they get me in to sit at a table, and they want to know my intentions. I don't know what they thought, if I was going to try to sponge off the money that the family got, or that I'm just going to spend Christmas with them, and I'm going to get a job for the winter, and I'm going to get a place to stay, and I'm going to try to help them out as much as I can. Of course, they were going to go back to Russia, and they were for a while they were trying to figure out if they could stay, but everything for them was in Russia, and nothing was left there for them anymore there. It was kind of strange. I went and spent some time for the family for Christmas, and helped with the son, the older one, his stepson, and got a job at a Starbucks for the winter. Peter Panic, the guy whose porch I'd been staying on before, was going away for the winter to Hawaii. He needed someone to sublet his apartment, so I did. Worked at and then the job came through for Japan. And had I not left, I would not come to Japan. I would have been under contract at my job in Atlanta, to not take that 3-month job for the spring. We were still, as far as performers, we were still kind of really quite high from the show we had done, and we thought we could put together a stage performance and sell tickets and do something called Just the Best. Jest, G-E-S-T. And it was horrible. The show itself was fine, but people were just fighting. All kinds of egos were just nuts. And I did the show I just wanted to get it over with. But I actually did a really great performance with my friend Leonard Solomon, who had also done the same act with me for Igor's benefit out on the street, where he played the suitcase drum, and I worked silent with my fiddle in the tall unicycle. It was great. And we did it again, and it was great. And I was leaving 2 weeks later to go to Japan for my job at Starbucks. It was right across the street from a travel agency. In the 2 weeks leading up to me leaving that job, they had a poster in the window said, "Destination of the month, Japan." I flew to Japan, and I'm still very raw from all this stuff. But I fly to Japan. I was still, I'd been talking with Holly. We're not going to be together, and it was really hard. I'd never broken up with anyone I was still in love with. And she was still in love with me. That had never happened in my life, but it's not happening. It's just, I'd even gone on a date, and 2 dates actually, and nothing. It's just nothing. And I fly to Japan. I'm working this job, and one day, it's beginning of Golden Week, I'm in I'm in my dressing room that I share with the costume characters. And the costume characters come in after there was this girl working part-time from the college that was just shadowing the person that was taking care of the costume character, to see what to do. And I looked and I saw, it was just side profile. And this jolt went through me. I want to describe it as like lightning, or just something just shaking the core of my being. And I didn't know what that was. What was that? I had no idea. I met her afterwards, and we, even took a picture that first meeting. And I went back to my hotel, and went back to the hotel, and I couldn't sleep. I'd lost my appetite. I closed my eyes to try to go to sleep, but just sleep wasn't coming. But every time I closed my eyes, all I saw was that burned image of her in my head. This went on for days. Finally, I said to my one of the co-workers there, this woman named Hito, what had happened, what was happening with me. And I go, I can't stop thinking of this girl, Masami. And I told her what happened and what's happening to me. And she said, maybe it's love at first sight. And I go like, really? I have no idea. I have no idea what this is. But I made a decision. Maybe I should ask her out and find out what this is. So under the guise of, can you show me around on my day off, Nagasaki, because I can't understand the language. Under the guise of that, I asked her out. Kind of. I said, here's my number. And come back to the hotel, and there's a message, from her. I called back, and yes, we're going to go out on this. And we go out on our first date, and at lunch, I'm trying to talk about things that I've been through. And I break down. Actually, I'm crying at lunch. But we go on, and we have the rest of the day. We had do all kinds of things. We had a great time. We did lots of things that day. And at the end of the day, end of the date, I asked if I could hold her hand. My aunt had once told me, she died when I was 21. She had told me when I was a late teenager that someday I was going to meet someone that all I need to do is hold her hand, and that's all I need. And that thought came to me as what happened next, because I held her hand, and I have very hairy arms, and all the hair on that arm stood on end. And I said, oh, God, this is great. And she says, yeah, it is. And we started dating. That's my wife. I had no idea how this was going to work out. It seems the most impractical thing. She was much younger than me. There's a cultural difference. Language difference. There's her family. There's the fact that I don't live in Japan. There are all these things. And that's what's happened. Now, over the years, they would continue to meet, the performers would continue to meet at Igor's place on the day that he died. It's one of the reasons I don't remember that date, and they all will. I think I chose anyway to remember birthdays more than death days. It's how I am. But also with Igor, it's because of who he was to me. You know, I've never been to that spot since that night. And they built a memorial. There's a little statue of his puppet called Doo-Doo on that intersection there in Brattle Square, Boston. Anybody can go there at any time and be able to see it. And they also see down at the foot of the statue a brick that's engraved saying Igor Fokin, 1960 to 1996, and in the memory of him and all street performers. Now, that's how I am. I know his birthday, of course, because we celebrated our birthdays. His daughter's grown up to be a film director. The son, born 2 weeks before he died, is director of opera. His son doesn't speak English, but Anna Fokin, his daughter, speaks English, and we've communicated, and I almost always contact her on her father's birthday. And his stepson, I ended up getting him work because he was working with his dad's puppets. And I got him 2 gigs in Malaysia and 1 in China, which set him on a whole new career. And since then, since I got him that, he went on to becoming a professional puppeteer, working festivals throughout Europe. And he works different than his dad. It's different, of course. It's different also because when you're a puppeteer that builds the puppets, it's different than a manipulator that works puppets that are built by a different hand. It just happens. You know, I'm a puppeteer. I'm these different things. And this has been a long story, but it's one that had huge impacts on my life. It was a short friendship that had a impact that will last me forever. And one person's life that also impacted, other performers. My relationship and how I was impacted is different than they would. That's just how it is. He was my friend, and he's very proud of his daughter. I'm proud of them all, and Igor's wife remarried, as you would expect people to over time. I'm still friends with my girlfriend's Holly's son. He's got children, and recently he just sent me a photo of going to Boston, him next to the statue that I've never been at, Igor's old spot. And he remembered meeting Igor at our apartment. He was a young adult at that time. He's got kids of his own. He's grown. I guess it's about impact. It was crazy. The story itself is just filled with all kinds of different things. So I'm going to close with something my friend Brian Bailey, who I went on that first trip that led me there to Montreal. I'd seen him shortly after what happened with the concert and for Igor, and the show for Igor benefit and all that. And I was telling him about what happened in Atlanta. And I said to Brian, we were close enough to where the bomb went off. And it was close enough in time, too, that we had finished our shows, that possibly someone that had seen my show had been injured. To which Brian said, Tack, everybody who sees your show is injured. Cheers, everyone. Okay. It might rain on me while I'm going for this walk. I knew that one of the stories I'm going to need to talk about is one that I've had a big impact on my life. And the story is, as I was talking to my friend Dan Thurman the other day,